Welcome back to the Metaphysical Mindset. I am your host, Elisha Mancini Caster, and today our guest is Scott Nash. So, welcome, Scott. It's good to see you as always. So, what do you want to talk about?
I don't know. It's good to see you too. Thanks for having me back. Well, a few things, I guess. The one thing about, we were mentioning mediumship the last time we were talking, and we didn't get too deep into it, like how to actually do it. We talked in generalities, but we didn't go deep into it. But
Sure.
One very important thing that I think we both agree on is being able to shut off your subconscious mind before you go to try and do mediumship, because the subconscious mind can interfere with the messages that you're getting, basically. And that's because everybody has their own internal thoughts about things and opinions, and those can get in the way. Right. So like if I have an opinion about something, if, whatever it could be, politics, anything, in my messages about that, my subconscious mind could slant it towards that. So you kind of, you want to get your own personality out of the way as much as possible and your own thoughts. Otherwise you can't get a clear message.
For sure.
And so the one thing that we were taught that we've done every single time we've ever given messages to anybody or practiced mediumship is we have like a little affirmation that we say first. And I'll say it now, and maybe we can get it posted up on the site where this video ends up so that you can see it there for yourself, write it down or whatever. But it goes like this. I, and then you state your name. So it'd be like, I, Scott Edward Nash, open my heart and mind to spirit. I now call on my guides and teachers, and I command my subconscious mind to be dormant during this message time or during, whatever you're doing there, because you want it back eventually. But so during this message time, during this meditation session, so you'll just say that, and you're basically commanding your subconscious mind to get out of the way for a while. Okay. So that's the practice that we've always done. And that's come through a few different times from different people saying that is the proper thing to do to try to get it out of the way. And so I just wanted to mention that because it's important, because I've seen, and I'm sure Alicia has too, we've seen where the subconscious mind can get messages and take over. And it can get you can get information from there. I'm not saying that you can't, but when you're getting messages and you want it to be from spirit, you want it to be from spirit, not from the collective conscious mixed with your own thoughts and opinions. I guess that's the best way I can say it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And then I think the very next thing that you need to do after you command your subconscious mind, and we were taught this, is we need to go into that space of wonderment, just like a child would. And that's really where the messages come through so clearly, because when we're in that state of wonderment, just kind of looking with a curiosity and a lightheartedness, we have nothing to gain, or our ego is out of the way, whether or not the message that's coming through is perfect or correct or whatever. When we come to it with the mind of a child in that sense of wonderment, we get clear symbols.
And I guess I would just say that's why when we would give messages on Sunday or whatever in class, it's always easier to give messages to somebody you don't know, because your personal opinions about that person or things that you know about them, all those things are not there. You don't have anything to grasp onto. So you're going, oh, what is my feeling? What am I getting about this person? And something comes there, and it's from somewhere that you don't know, because you know nothing about the person. They just maybe walked into the chapel for the first time that day, And we've always said it's a lot easier to give messages sometimes to somebody you know nothing about than it is if you were to come to me and say, hey, give me a message about something. But
Oh, for sure. And I think a lot of times what people do also is they try not to give a symbol that they already know. even though spirit's giving me this symbol, I'm almost rejecting it because I already know that about the person, and I don't want to say it.
Yes.
And so that kind of takes you on a little journey way off the path, where if you just say the symbol, even though you already know that about them, you'd probably get something else that you didn't know that would be validating.
Right. But when you're saying something that they know that you know already, it's like, oh, well, is that a message from you? Or are you just saying something because you know me? Or, I mean, and you run into a bunch of different kinds of people that all think different kinds of ways. So it's different every time. But, you know, it is kind of interesting.
So when talking about the subconscious mind being out of the way, we kind of had a little conversation about that yesterday.
We were kind of talking about what the energy feels like right now, like what's kind of going on, at least in our own lives, and probably, we assume, probably happening to other people at the same time. And so I thought we were going to talk a little bit about that. Is that where you were headed?
Oh, we can totally talk about that. My thought was about when we learn to operate without the subconscious mind in general, when you're able to do that, it does a lot of things for you and it works for you. So we were kind of talking about that. And then we got into the energy of right now, what lessons we're kind of learning individually, and then also seeing in the world around us within friends, culturally. So we kind of got into
about how we're guided when we get into that spot. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, because yes. I mean, that could go in 5 different directions.
It could, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is true. Once you get that out of the way and you're open to things, then you open yourself up to all possibilities, right? You're not limiting yourself, for one thing. And you might catch little things that you normally wouldn't pay attention to. Like today, I had a show on in the background while I was working today. And there was a statement that a guy made that was exactly kind of what we were talking about. And he said, never be afraid to say the truth and tell the truth about what you think. The truth is the truth. Don't sugarcoat it for my feelings or whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh. Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's so weird. Because I know that, and you remember we were talking about that. And we can go down that path if you want.
Sure.
A bit. I mean, the energy that I've been feeling lately and the thoughts that have been running through my mind have been a lot about being happy to be myself and not hiding who I am from the world or even from myself. I guess that's the best way to put it. Now, I can give you some examples, and I don't know that other people do this because no one ever talks about stuff like this, because people want to keep it to themselves. They want to keep themselves hidden away to a degree. People do. So, but I grew up with brothers and sisters, and if you have, then you know what it's like to pick on each other and get picked on all the time and make fun of you and try to get under your skin in different ways. And so at a young age, I learned just to totally ignore it, right? Totally just ignore it. And then they stop because they're not getting their enjoyment out of bugging you, right? And so I was pretty quick on picking that up. So I was like, okay, it doesn't bother me at all, whatever, do. But really, it does bother you, those little things. And you don't want them to keep on starting again on something new, right? So you want to hide your little flaws or hide these things about yourself. Like I'll give an example. This is not a great example, but you'll get the point. So I do resin 3D printing, and I have a friend that does it. And we'll make mistakes once in a while doing something, right? We'll do something that just wasn't good. Oh, I took the resin bin out in the sun and the whole thing hardened me in 2 seconds. And I had to try to get it back out and all this, whatever. But when something would happen to me, a minor little thing, in general, I just wouldn't mention it. because I don't want anybody to use that against me, to pick on me and go, oh, you're an idiot or whatever. You did that. It's just like one of those just stupid little things. But it's like that in a lot of different aspects of my life, right? Like where I just keep things to myself. If somebody asks me a question, I'll answer it. But it's kind of like just an omission of really being out there with who I am, right? Like not really sharing that part of myself. All the flawed parts that I have. But I think there is a time coming where people are going to be more open just to who they are. And I think that's what's coming, because more and more the message that I keep on getting is big deal. That's who you are. If you make a mistake, just own it, right? And to a degree, just own who you are, because there's nothing wrong with who you are. Yeah. Right. Sure. And a lot of people have to get to that. And I think we were talking about how we get changed by our environment to become something that we probably are not or wouldn't have become. And for me, the one example that I can think of is in kindergarten. I grew up in Detroit and I went to a public school, and it's Detroit. It's pretty rough, so my parents didn't want that for me and my sisters and my brother, and they saw, how things were going. So they paid for a private Christian school for us to go to. And so I went there from first, second, third grade. And it was a totally different thing, because like you're going to a chapel like twice a day. Everybody is all loving and kind, like, follow the way of Jesus, be like this and that. So, it's just everyone is nice to each other. They don't allow anybody picking on anybody else or nothing. It's just all happy, fun, be kind to one another, right? Yes. And that's how I was, right? Oh, I love Jesus. He's awesome. He's the greatest, and everybody's good, and everybody, and all this stuff. And then my parents, I think my dad was finally like, and we moved away from that area, so I had to go somewhere else as well. But I do remember my dad saying that we need to learn what it's like in the real world, because I think he could just see we were being too sheltered about what the world is really like, and he didn't want us to go, I guess through 12 grades and not be prepared for that people really aren't like that in general, right? Not always happy, kind, giving. Everybody's going to go out of their way to help you. That's just not the way it is. So in fourth grade, I went to a public school, and I remember still going there. I was crying. I didn't want to go. I had to ride the bus and all this, and I went there. And the kids, they took me to my classroom. All the kids were like looking at me sidelong and whispering amongst each other. I really did not feel welcome at all. And I found out later, apparently, and these are kids, right? We're talking 9 years old, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there. And they're all talking about, oh, we're going to beat them up on the playground and all this stuff, right? That's what they had been talking about. But, within a day, all those kids became my friends, and then they became my best friends. But I know that it changed me because I changed the way that I talk, the words that I used, my mannerisms, all these things to fit in, and it's not anything wrong with that. It's just, that's what you do, right? If you're smart, that's what you do, because then you see what's happening, and then you want to be part of that. So then you just change a little bit. You do things like they do, and right, you become like them. Then you're part of the group. Then you're in. Yeah. And for a kid, that's just a normal thing. Even for somebody 50 years old like I am, it could still be the same thing, right? I want to fit in. Oh, this person does this, I'll do it like that. But I think, it's just part of how we evolve, right? It's part of our evolving process. I think that we did just a natural thing that people do, and there's nothing wrong with it either, but it's just, I did change, and I probably would not have changed in that way. I'd be somebody else. So who would I be if I didn't change back then to be that? What would I be today? Or who am I really, and who do I want to be? So
absolutely, which it's easy to kind of see from the story how programmable we are as a people.
Definitely, for sure. So it's in everything, right? Some things you watch on TV, things or whatever, everything can guide and change the
Influence.
way you think about things. And it can be done in ways that are slowly introduce something, then slowly introduce something a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further until you're somebody different than who you started off as.
Well, I think the saying is look around at your closest five and you will see who you will become. And that's a really valuable, we say that to the kids all the time. Who's part of your closest five? How do they treat people? How do they treat you? How do they treat themselves?
Right. So I think that's the energy that's coming, is people becoming who they really are, seeing themselves for who they really are, accepting themselves for who they really are, and just putting themselves out there without being worried about what other people think. You know, you don't have to be liked by everybody necessarily, and you never will be, no matter how nice you are. You know, some people just don't want to be your friend. They just don't.
Sure. And for a lot, great. I think it's interesting to see too. I think a lot of people are starting to become aware of their own process of healing. So maybe if we have some behaviors or characteristics that we don't like, we can kind of look to our past and see how we developed them. And so now it's really turning into a time period in our history where we've recognized that we can program ourselves.
I think you're exactly right. That's kind of what the energy in a nutshell is. It's like we're exposing your behaviors to yourself so that you can decide whether that's your behavior or not. Yeah. Make the conscious choice. Like now it's the conscious choice of your behavior, not just your subconscious, you know, trying to fit in, you know, fight or flight reflexes and all these things. It's just a conscious decision. What do you want to do? And they're making it so that you can see the flaws in yourself and be able to just say, oh, well, that's not even a flaw. That's not a big deal. Who cares?
You say making it. Are you talking about spirit? That when you say they're making it?
Yeah.
They're helping us to see? For
sure. That's the case. Yes. Spirit, or that's the energy that's coming from the universe, as the energy changes, and that the vibration changing is maybe leading to that, right? Leading to different waves of energy coming in that are make you think a different way or see different things that you hadn't seen before. Or
dispensations coming in from the cosmos, coming up from Gaia, because we're living on a conscious planet in a conscious solar system with conscious black matter all around us.
And then we have the collective conscious of everything that we're all part of, that everybody's right. So that energy is affecting everybody at the same time. That's why when I mentioned it to you, you were like, yes, exactly. That's exactly kind of what I'm feeling as well. And then we thought, oh, other people probably think that too, but they probably think maybe they're the only ones.
And I think if you're not used to talking about, I think that's why it's so important to have discussions about what you're going through, how you're feeling, and what you're learning or not learning. Sometimes we're just having, like this past couple weeks. I mean, I've definitely been learning, but I mean, Stephen got in a car wreck. I got in a car wreck. I got a flat tire on the side of the road yesterday. Stephen's lip got busted. He had to get stitches. Gaetano got in trouble. Salvatore's had this bad experience with a friend. Like things are just kind of feeling like they're unraveling, which lets us know. I mean, it can let us know a lot of things. I think for us, we're going through a lot of changes and we're adapting to what is to come. And some people may not realize that that's what's happening for them also. And I think too, sometimes when this happens, people think, oh no, I better not go this route. This is a sign. And I say, I don't know that it's necessarily a sign not to go in that direction, but notice, maybe look a little deeper and see, is this just happening because your life is making all these adjustments and you need to be a little more aware of what is changing and how it's affecting you?
Right. It could be a few different things, in my opinion. It could be clearing your karma, right? So like just those things are coming out, or it simply could be a test to see what your reaction are to the events. which for you, I know that these aren't really even a test. It's just, you know, you go, oh no, that's a bummer that happened, but you just go on. There was a time in my life when bad things would happen that I would get all mad, upset, all, you know what I mean? All those things, and just vent about it for weeks on end. Oh, poor me. Yeah. But now those are just like little, I just see them as little bitty testing things just to see, and it's just another way to see how far you've come.
Yeah.
That things don't really, you know, the things you have control over, you have control over. The things you don't let them bother you, because there's no point. Why waste your energy and get into that?
Yes. Absolutely. Well, and some people aren't dealing with those changes, and they aren't accepting the invitation to accept more of who they are, and they're fighting against it. And so it's easy to get caught up in the energy of wanting to fight it and not change and not accept that and continue to have those secondary gains and look away from the opportunity. And so when that's around you often, when you're going through these things, I mean, especially if you're someone that's working with a lot of people, and like we work from home, it's a little different for us, but people that go to work and work with a lot of people, they have to deal more with that influence and that collective energy that's in their workspace. And so it is definitely more contagious, especially if we're tired.
Right, for sure. For sure.
A good time whenever I'm starting to go through that, I canceled a couple appointments this week. I thought, you know what? I really need to not have very much on my schedule. As far as going out into the world, it definitely gave me more time to work on the book and do things at the house. And I was grateful for that. But it's kind of like, yeah, I think I'll stay home in hermit mode a little bit and reflect and journal and sleep.
Well, like you said, sometimes we go through periods, right, that we just don't feel like doing anything or whatever that is. And for me, that was about a 2-year period. These last 2 years, that's kind of how I was, just like nothing, just, we say hermit mode. It's just kind of, you just all by yourself. You don't want to go out. You don't want to do anything. You just want to sit. It just felt like I didn't have the energy to do nothing, and there was nothing to be doing. So I was just waiting, that's kind of how I felt. But the energy right now, really, and it is really, that's what it's coming down to, is the choice. That's what I believe we're being shown, is that there's a choice to either face it and change or not. And I think it's an important time to choose what you want, right? That's what it is, a conscious decision. What do you want? Do you want to be this, or do you want to be that? And I think we've all gone through enough trials in our life to know what things bring not as good outcomes as other things.
I think so too. And let's put a little frame around maybe the people that I think right now are really being called forward to stand in their own truth about who they are, how they feel about themselves and the world around them, what experiences they're going through. I think it's a time right now to be vocal and to share. I know you're saying it's been the last 2 years that you kind of felt like you were at home and you were quiet and you didn't really feel like there was much to do. I feel like I would have little spurts of, okay, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to teach some classes. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to, do this or that and kind of be involved in the community, whether it was a healing share or however I was working with people. But I think there's this acceptance that we have, like in the spiritual community, of people that work with spiritual practices and sharing that with people, and especially people that are very knowledgeable and creative. There's this acceptance that we have that, and I'm so guilty of this for years. It's like, I don't want to put myself out there. I really don't want to deal with what comes along with having an online presence. and a public presence and speaking and have people having opinions towards me. I don't want their energy mixing with my energy. I really think I can pull this off. And I did pull it off locally. I had classes and it was a beautiful thing. But there was always this knocking in the background saying, you really need to develop a community online so that you can reach more people and so that more people can be a part of your energy field and the field of energy that you can build with others. Like you and I work together for so many years. We have great chemistry. We always build a community or a setting that is very loving and open. And it's no secret that we all have mediumship abilities and we all have energy healing abilities, and that we all deserve to use those aspects of who we are. And we believe so much that the future depends on people waking up to those abilities and allowing them to become a part of who they are. And so it's never been taught to us or been around us to say, oh, I'm this great medium and this great healer, and come to me, I will heal you and I will tell you your future. We were always just in the environment where we knew that these were just our birthrights and that we had to help people recognize those skills within themselves. And so now it's like this extension, I feel like even more, to call out to other people in the spiritual community that have been practicing by themselves, that have been alone, that have these skills, that know how to share them and teach them and enjoy watching people grow when they do that. They have to come out of the house, and they need a way to share that with the world so that they can, so that this can become normal and everyday knowledge for every person.
Definitely. But part of that is, again, it goes back to accepting yourself first of all, because then if you can't accept yourself, then it's hard to accept other people too. Right? Because if you can't accept that you have flaws, then how can you look at other people when you see it's easier to see other people's flaws than your own, right?
But when you're talking about flaws, what do you mean?
I don't know, ego, and things that we would consider to be a trait that you would want to get rid of.
Oh, you mean like before you launch into a sharing? I
mean, just in general in the world.
Oh, I see.
Accepting the guy at the store, accepting, whatever, to be accepting of just people in general. You have to be able to accept yourself first. Right? Because everybody's got flaws. And once you start doing that, it kind of just opens up the universe, really, because then you're connected with everything too.
Yeah. So once you start doing like mediumship or tapping into your intuition or using those guided symbols to kind of navigate your life, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. And energy healing opens us up to the potential that we are perfectly capable of taking care of ourselves in many ways, not always, but in most ways, really.
It's because it comes down to, I think Reverend Connie would say, at some point you have personal responsibility that you accept.
Yes.
I'm responsible for my choices. You'll hear people say, well, I didn't choose to be born, but we both know that that's not true, right?
Yeah.
Like we might not remember the choice, but we chose it, right?
Yes.
We chose our life path. We chose to incarnate. We chose to come. So even then we can't even escape and blame that on somebody else. It's like, everything comes back to your own choice and your own energy. And sometimes things happen which seem out of the blue, but there's a reason behind it. Whether it's just for a learning thing or something you wanted to come to experience so that you could, overcome it or know what it's like to go through those kind of problems. So you have empathy for other people, all those kinds of things. But, you got to take your own responsibility there to go, I'm responsible for myself and what happens. And what energy I put out there to make new things happen.
Well, and it's easy to get caught up in, and I think it puts us on a loop when we get caught up in victimization and we're saying that they did this to us, and we stay stuck. And sometimes we don't even realize that we've experienced a trauma where we've blamed the person, and rightfully so. But at some point we do have to come to, and you will notice if you're on a spiritual path, eventually the path will lead you into forgiving that person, no matter how horrific the act was. Holding onto the anger and resentment, or whatever those feelings are, towards the person that victimized you, only hurts who you are, because then you actually are holding negative energy in your body, which is attracting negative experiences to continue to happen. And that keeps us in the victim loop. And so it's really hard, I think, sometimes for some people to want to look at the victim loop, because then they have to take responsibility for not taking the opportunity when it arose on their path to do the healing necessary to forgive the person that victimized them, so that they could be free of that energy, which turns into a block and stops them from achieving their goals, which I think also happens on the spiritual path. I know we call that spiritual bypassing a lot of times, but it's easy to get caught up in that loop. I am definitely have been guilty of that in my life. And I'm sure I still am. I haven't.
Well, I mean, with some things we probably don't even remember, because like spirit will lead us to the things at the right times. I'm sure. I mean, I used to push everything back into the back corner of my mind somewhere in some little room and shut that door and never go there again. Right. Yeah. Just like forget all about it. Never happened. Whatever. Right. And spirit has a way to opening that door eventually. Right. If you're looking, they're going to like make a little crack, and then a little piece will come out, and then you deal with that little piece, and then you move on. And I mean, I think it's kind of in some way a part of human nature too. When somebody does something to you, your initial thought sometime might be, I will never forgive that person. You know, then you've made an affirmation that kind of locks it into a promise to yourself that you've locked in place, that makes it hard to get rid of later, because like you know what I mean? Because you've kind of just said, okay, that's my decision. And if you're not open to changing your mind, right? Like you never think about it again because you locked it in back then, right? I've already decided this is what I'm never forgiving. And I do know people that, you know, have situations like that where they just will still say, you have to forgive. No, I'm never forgiving.
For sure.
You know, and I understand that too, that they just can't, but it's not, forgiving the person doesn't mean you have to go up to the person and tell them you forgive them either. It's just a way to forgive the situation that happened, right, and get out of it. You never have to talk to that person again. You never have to see that person again. It's really just clearing it out of your own energy, right? It's just a way to look at it and go, well, this happened. It was awful. It should have never happened. This person did it. And then be able to try to take to some degree that person's perspective, which it may be totally impossible to do, right? Like you can't get into that person's mind because it's nothing you would ever do to somebody else. You know, you would never treat anybody like that, or you would never cheat somebody, or, you know, swindle them, or what, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Whatever, all these things. And, but it's really just about getting over it, looking at it yourself, and really just evaluating it rather than pushing it away and trying to forget about it.
Yes.
You know, and then once you can do those things, you just free yourself. It's just like a weight that's lifted off your shoulders. It's gone. You don't have to think about it anymore.
It's
you know,
yes.
Like there's people I've forgiven that I just don't have any contact with, and I don't want to ever have contact with them. But it's forgiven to the point where I don't hold anything against them, but I still don't want to have anything to do with them. I guess that's like the place that I get to.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really acceptable place of, because there's many different relationships that happen once you forgive someone. And so there's no one way to look towards, so forgiveness happens and then this is next, because forgiveness can happen, but that doesn't mean you ever have to talk to that person again. And that's okay. Now, if there is a forgiveness that can take place, and then, yeah, you move into a renewed relationship and you explore what can happen with both parties feeling safe and not triggered. That's also a wonderful, I think people just have that misconception sometimes that forgiveness means that you have to reconnect and live a life connected to that person again. And that's absolutely not, you're right. It's not true.
Right. Don't do that, because like you still see the person as like, that's not, I mean, you see the person for who they are and you see yourself for who you are, and you're okay with that.
Yeah.
To a degree, right?
Yeah.
But you just don't want to have nothing to do with them because you don't need that kind of energy or experiences in your life. So you just cut that off. And I mean, even with people that I've been friends with for a long time, as I went down the spiritual path, they just kind of fall off. Yeah. To a degree, because they're just different, right?
Oh, yeah.
They have different desires. They're going a different way. That they're not spiritually minded maybe right now. Maybe one day they will be, but right now they're not. So your energies just become incompatible. And so it really just like falls off. It's not like you call them up, I'm not hanging out with you anymore. It's just kind of, you just stop talking to each other. It's like really natural the way the process happens, but they just kind of fall off, and then new people move in.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you attract the other kind of people that have the same energy as you. And then then you're going down the path again. I guess that's really that's the difference, I guess, between what I was talking about earlier with you changing to fit in.
Yeah.
And changing naturally to being who you are. And then you just attract the other people that are similar. And then you end up in the group you're supposed to be with.
Right. With like-minded people. I think that's really valuable. I think forgiveness takes us into a place of self-responsibility very naturally. So practicing forgiveness really is accepting the fact that we came to the earth plane to have these experiences to grow and enhance who we are. And so I think the more we forgive, the more we accept that we accept that there were lessons to be learned from having the experience, and that we chose these experiences so that we could learn them.
I mean, I think we need to also mention it's also being able to forgive yourself. I mean, and that's really hard to do. Like I've made some big mistakes before,
Oh yeah, me too.
and then you just hold on to it forever and ever and ever. At some point you have to go, you know what? I made a stupid decision. I would never do that again now. I hate myself for doing it. Yeah. I don't know why I did it.
Yeah.
I did it. That's something that I did. I forgive myself for it. I'm not going to do it again, and I'll move on. I mean, that's how you learn. You learn the easiest by making mistakes, right?
Yeah.
When you're learning mathematics, if you make a mistake on a problem and somebody points out, oh, you have to carry the 1 over here, you never forget it because you didn't understand it, and then somebody showed it to you. And then you go, oh, I see now. And so when you make a mistake and you face it, you learn the most that way. So, and that's hard to forgive yourself sometimes too.
Definitely hardest to forgive who we are. I would have to agree with that, because we can see how, but we need to flip it and see, even when we've hurt someone and we recognize that we've caused them pain. And sometimes with your children, you realize, oh my gosh, this could be a pain that they're going to have someday to go through with their counselor. Like, I'm just like, oh my gosh. But then you have to recognize that they chose to come through and have that experience. And I think we're with forgiveness and openness. And I think when we're willing to forgive ourselves, it does help our children to see. And it's nice too, because we can apologize.
Right.
Where maybe our parents couldn't really do that because, and not everybody's parents, but I know that mine, I mean, maybe my dad apologized sometimes, but my mom had a hard time apologizing. It was a tricky thing because they felt so justified in their actions, and it's a hard skill.
Everybody sees the situations differently too. It's like people don't even remember it the same. So it's really strange. Oh, my dad was super mean to us growing up. And I mentioned that to him one time. He had no idea what I was talking about. I mean, something that happens in a 5-year-old's mind compared to what's happening in a 40-year-old person's mind, they see it totally different. It impacts it, what sticks with you is different.
Absolutely. Gaetano and I were just talking about this today, how two people can look at the same exact incident, but it's never the same. And I think sometimes this is a problem that I have with people online voicing a lot of opinions about what you are supposed to, the opinion that you're supposed to have when you're looking at something. And it could be anything, but people have this is what you should be seeing. And sometimes it's really hard to look at what someone else might see as offensive, or what might really shock someone and really trigger them. The next person sitting next to you doesn't have that response at all and really enjoys it. But it's just because of our life experiences and how we've grown into our own, and how we've experienced our programming up until now. So we can look at the same situation take place. One person can find it offensive and the other person enjoys watching it and doesn't feel offended at all.
Right. It's interesting, isn't it? It all has to do with our own personal experiences, what we've come with, and then what's happened to us since we've been here, what the things we've seen, the things we've done, the other things people have done around us.
And that's not even thinking about past lives.
Right.
That's not even thinking about what could have happened, like my Reiki teacher did not like necklaces. Well, poor thing came into a past life and realized that she was choked. And so necklaces in this lifetime just weren't a thing for her. I think she did end up getting over that. But that is definitely this life, last life. There's a lot of energy around situations that color the lens that we see life through. And it's really important, I think, to honor and to honor everyone's opinion about how they're experiencing what they're looking at and what's taking place. Okay, so on the topic of mediumship, let's talk a little bit about intuition and how important, because some people might not connect with mediumship, or maybe they don't even want to have the experience of learning how to talk to their loved ones or their spirit guides. But another skill that I think is really important for our evolution as human beings is how to navigate our intuitive skills, our intuitive abilities. So I kind of think of, and I wrote about this in my book.
Okay.
Well, I wrote about the brain kind of being like a computer, and the emotions that we have are our coding. So I feel like you're really you're gonna laugh at me.
No, this is exactly how I think. This is something that I've been thinking about recently myself. It's just like we are actually almost just artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We go through mistakes, we make mistakes, we see the mistake, we adjust, or we don't, and then we do the mistake again, and then we adjust. It's like eventually you hit a threshold where you go, okay, I've made this mistake 100,000 times now. It's finally pushed me over the limit where I don't like the outcome. I finally see the outcome after 100,000 times, and the outcome always turns out to be bad. So because of that, I will now switch my behavior.
And write a new code, right?
Right. So now anytime the situation comes up in the future, I'll go down this other path of code. Now what? And then what's the end goal is to become somebody that's putting out positive energy, that's living in their own reality, their own space, right? Love and peace.
And the end game is that we all start to become open to, this is what I think people that are intuitive should start to do. And people that work in mediumship and channeling, or however this unfolds for them or looks for them. And I feel like I got a message from spirit maybe like a year ago to start doing this. And I do it a lot. I'm very intuitive, and sometimes, sometimes people will think I can read their minds, but it's just because the energy of everyone's thoughts, I know how to hold space for people to express themselves. And so they just become very open. And then our energy fields start to merge, and we kind of start to operate in connection to one another. And so it's not that I'm seeing their thoughts, it's just that the information that they're thinking about, it just starts to become available, which I think happens a lot. I think a lot of people do that and just don't realize it. Or maybe they do. But I believe that we need to start acting as if people can read our minds, so that it holds us accountable to being in connection with one another in a respectful, open way. So, and I know that that's not easy, but I think that that's where we're headed as a species of people. So I think the more we practice, because holding space is a real thing that we can do for people. We can keep people, we can hold a space where people are, and we can hold it sacred, and we don't feel strong opinions towards what they're saying or how they're expressing themselves. And that makes people become more comfortable. And then they start to share more. Sometimes they start to feel a little inspirational speaking come in. And we get to higher states of consciousness when we learn how to do that. I mean, counselors do it all the time. They hold space for people. People that are really good at doing that have deeper relationships. I truly believe, with all the people I've worked with. So I really think as we move towards unity consciousness, this is going to be a skill. If we can develop it consciously, will help us move into that ascension process. So I try to operate like that when I'm with people, that just assuming that they can read my mind, even though they can't. I really try to keep my mind as open and clear as possible and free of judgment, so that that can take place.
Let's say down the line, everybody does have the ability to know what other people are thinking. So what would that mean for society? It would mean people better start thinking more on the right track, or it's going to be people fighting in the streets just over what people are thinking about sometimes, right? Like, oh, this person they think I'm dirty, or they think this, or you know what I mean? Right? Let's say, right? You can read somebody else's thoughts and they're negative to you, then you're picking up that negative thing. So I think probably one of the things is, first of all, you're in touch with your own feelings. So that allows you, and you know what feelings feel like, you can pick that up easy from other people and interpret it right away. Like for me, I'm not that in touch. So I don't know what I feel things, but I don't know how to describe it or how to put it into a category. Right? I don't know what category that feeling is or how to put it into words if I pick up certain energies. Certain ones I do, certain ones, I don't. But I think you're right. That's where it's going. And so then it comes down to like another Buddhist thought, which is, one of their 8 things, one of them is right thinking. You have to have right thinking. And that's like thinking about the right things all the time and stuff, and catching yourself when you're not, so that you can go back to that. That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
But I think people do that. I think you're right. I think most people don't know that that's what's happening. Even me sometimes, if I just am talking to somebody and our conversation goes a certain way, it's because we're picking up on each other's energy and thoughts about something, and then we are in the same space. It makes the conversation go easy.
Yeah. And you feel so connected and open. I think that the technology of AI, of interacting with our brains, is not the right path. And I think that if we continue to develop, like for me, I see it, it has to go in the direction of intuitive development, or it's going to go in the direction of developing AI that works in sync with our brains. So to me, intuitive development is so critical, especially right now. And it's part of the programming. I think that, like when I said, I see our brains as computers, the emotions are the code. So we know what codes are being run in our mind based on how we feel about them and the emotions that are coming up, because those just are spontaneous. And then we can process those emotions and the coding through using psychology. But really, the intuitive development piece has to be developed so that we can see the viruses, so that we can see what we need to do to change the programming, so we can see all of those aspects of what can go wrong when the code isn't written correctly. Because if we don't have the intuitive development piece, what's going to happen? How are we going to make those changes to support ourselves and then to be in support of our communities and have that unity consciousness? Because right now there's a lot of fighting going on and people are really angry that people aren't feeling a certain way about religion or culture, whatever that is. And I think that that's part of the process that's taking us. It's the healing process that we're on, the healing path that's taking us to our intuitive development that's going to unify us in the end.
Right. I think that's what we're going to see. That's where we're going. And I think in a few years, as it keeps on going, it's going to become more and more clear that that's where the path is that we're on for that to happen, you know?
So there's some things that we can do, right? I guess I do just want to highlight those really quick, but it makes me think about the pineal gland, and it makes me think about how important that gland is in our bodies. It's that tiny little pea-shaped gland in the middle of our brain that a lot of scientists have said that there's it doesn't do anything, but many cultures, especially spiritual cultures or cultures that focus a lot on consciousness and meditation, they know that pineal gland, and I think now through psychedelics and plant medicines, we're starting to have more of an awareness of what that gland actually does. It releases DMT, and it helps us develop those intuitive abilities. But there are all those things like fluoride that we have in our water that calcifies that gland, and negative thinking takes us away from our intuitive processes. God, just to name a couple.
Right. All those things. So it's kind of like you were talking about how people are getting caught up in all the strange stuff happening this week for you, for instance, like people that get caught up in that, they get stuck in that cycle if they don't view it from a different perspective. Just like let it go on its way, right? Deal with it in a happy, calm way. Get it out of the way. I mean, I know it sucks. It's financial. It's all, you know what I mean? It's inconvenience. It's all these different things, but you just have to, hey, it's fine. You know, it will pass too, just like everything else, and it'll be okay. Just go on past it, be happy, and keep on going. If you don't, you get stuck in that. Like there's like different things you can try to do, right? Like to improve your intuitive abilities. Like if you're going, even if you're just going to the store or something, and there's multiple roads you can pick.
Yeah.
You can say like, oh, which way do I think might be the good way? Even if you always go the same way, something might hit you like, oh, this route would be a better route to take today. And then you just follow it. You do it. I mean, you might not notice anything, but you may have just stopped, escaped an accident, or you may have not had to get in a traffic jam or whatever reason, just because you were trying to say, hey, let me listen. What choice would I make right now? But a lot of times my intuition, I don't know, to me, it seems like it works different than it does for other people, but maybe some people it works the same way. To me, it's almost like I kind of feel like what I'm supposed to be doing is like what I want to do. Like I'll get like an inspiration to do something, right? Like, oh, I feel like I should do this. And then I just like do it. So I just kind of like follow what I feel like doing, no matter what it might be, something crazy with arts and crafts, or, I'll make a turtle shell rattle or do this or that. Okay. And I just go buy the stuff and start putting stuff together. Or I'll do something. Like I'm not afraid to try.
Yeah, you're not.
One time I can give you a good example though. I had some extra money at one point and I was going to see a person and I knew that they weren't making a ton of money and didn't have a ton of money. And so I was thinking, oh, I could give this person some money, right? And so I'm thinking about it, right? Like that's the idea that pops in. And then I'm like, how much money? And then it was like $125. And I was like, okay, $125. So I didn't want this person to know because I didn't want them to think differently of me. Okay. Because I don't want them to go, oh, this person either thinks I need it or they're trying to want something from me or anything like that. So I just snuck it into I saw their jacket and I stuck it in there.
Yeah.
Well, this person had found it and they mentioned it to somebody else. Hey, I found this money in my jacket. And this person called and asked me if I had done it. And I mean, I didn't want anybody to know. I just wanted it to be done, But this person just kept on hounding me. And I was like, yes, I did do it, but just don't tell the person because I don't want him to know and this and that. And she was like, that is exactly the amount he needed for something. Oh. I was just like, wow, see? So I don't do stuff like that all the time. I'm not the greatest guy in the world or go around doing this kind of stuff. I'm just saying that was like one time where I was listening and it was like, this is what I feel like I should do, which, it just feels really strange, but I'll do it. And it turned out that it probably was about exactly the right message, the amount and everything.
Yeah.
So things can happen really strange like that.
Yeah. I used to do that in the morning before I would go to work. I would like if spirit was, pack a rose quartz, pack this. And sometimes it would be stuff that like I really enjoyed, but I was like, what is going to happen? And sure enough, I would be in a situation where it was like, oh, this is for you. This is for you. And it would just really make sense. Like a rose quartz for somebody that really just needed to know how to feel love. And they didn't have crystals. That wasn't in their, So I love that. And I think it's so interesting when we follow those cues and spirit loves it. So as soon as when they realize that we will follow the guidance,
hey, this guy will do anything. Watch it.
It's awesome.
So when you start, like, let's say when I get animated, right? Like, it's just like, oh, like an idea pops into my head of what to say, right? And then I just go with it and I start talking and I don't spend any time thinking about what's coming next. It just is, right? The words are just there at the right time and I can keep on rambling really fast.
Yeah.
How do you stay in that state once it starts?
You don't start to analyze. So just allow it to continue to flow and stay in that opened mindset. So you just hold the space sacred and it will never close. And this happened to me a couple of weeks ago at a basketball game. I was talking to my girlfriend and I was starting to feel like I was supposed to talk about like inspiring her. And she was like, oh, your voice is changing. Oh yeah. Okay. And she said,
she knows you pretty good then. So she knew it was coming.
We're just used to it. So she was like, oh my gosh, you're channeling. And then I was like, wow. And then I just sat there and I was like, it's in my throat. But there were so many people around me. I was at a basketball game sitting in the So it was a tough situation, but I just held them there in my throat and just stayed in that open space and waited for, okay, there was no opportunity to continue the conversation. People were still listening. She kind of got a little like, okay, so I just let it go. But if you just stay open and in that loving, because Scott, when you do it, there's like that love is in your heart so big that it took over your mind. And that's when spirit comes through. So I don't know which guide it is, or it's probably all of your guides. Because when you do it, I feel like it's your guides. At least when I've seen you do it.
It just feels like happy to me. It just feels like happiness. I don't know how else to explain it. I just feel happy inside. And like, it's just like, oh, I can't wait to spit this out, but I can't keep it. I haven't figured out a way to keep it going or analyze the state I'm in to keep it there or whatever.
Analyze it. Yeah. It's just, it's that openness in your heart to keep flowing. And when you think about love and loving someone or sharing love or being expressive, like if I kept talking like that over and over, I would just naturally start to get into it. If I was talking about love and my spirit guides and a topic that is an issue for someone that I'm with at the moment, I could start to slowly fall into that space. So it becomes a real natural process eventually. And then as long as you just stay in that openness and that loving, sharing, giving energy, it just continues to flow. But it's definitely a heart thing.
Okay, so you get into a state like that and you don't have any preconceived idea of where the conversation's even going to go?
No.
You have no idea. Like you don't go, oh, it's going to be inspirational to say to this person, or it's going to be advice, or you don't know thoughts. It's just the words just start spitting out, or what?
Well, sometimes it'll drop and it'll be, well, it's kind of what happens to you. It drops like a package. So it's a little package that drops into your brain. And as soon as you see it, you recognize it and you get like, ooh. It's like you've seen the whole entire package because it's in your brain. You know what it is and you can't, oh, wait. And sometimes this is what I'll say this. Oh, this is so good.
Right. So you want to spit it out. So it's in there, right? The package dropped in, you've got it, you see it, and then the words just start pouring out.
Yeah. But the more you connect with the words and what you're saying and let your heart get involved, the more open you'll stay. And then another package will drop. And then eventually it might just start to kind of flow like a river. So if you just keep going and talking, but your whole, that tingle.
Yeah, I do know that.
That whole tingle, you just kind of lean into that tingling because that's the tingling is the higher knowledge. It is the higher vibration of that higher knowledge and that higher wisdom and those higher beings being in your field. So as long as you just keep leaning into that and loving the experience, it'll just flow until sometimes you just kind of want to turn it off and then you can just start thinking about where you are. Yeah. Good. Oh, well, I think this conversation needs to come to an end. Yeah. I hate to get off with you. It's always so nice talking to you. And I know that you're going to be on a lot and I really appreciate your presence on here because I think your perspective is so valuable. And I love talking to you and I always feel really comfortable because I know that our beliefs are the same and we really just want what's best for everyone that we're with and around and people that are close to us and the people that aren't.